Nobody buying an electric SUV thinks they are making a mistake. They have done the research. They have compared the range numbers. They have watched the reviews, read the articles, maybe even test-driven 2 or 3 options. And yet every single week, buyers are locking themselves into EV ownership experiences that quietly drain their finances, frustrate their routines, and leave them wondering why nobody warned them. The problem is never the specs. The problem is almost always the gap between what a vehicle promises on paper and what it actually delivers in the context of your life. Your commute, your charging situation, your insurance budget, your driving patterns, and your timeline for keeping the car. If you think this video is just another comparison between 3 good EVs, where you come out feeling like any choice is a solid one, you are about to discover something more uncomfortable than that. The biggest difference between these 3 electric SUVs is not range. It is not acceleration. It is not even price. The thing that will genuinely separate a smart purchase from an expensive mistake is something almost nobody talks about when they are standing on a dealer lot or configuring online. And by the time you understand what that thing actually is, you will look at every EV recommendation you have ever received in a completely different way. Think about what the EV market looks like right now from the outside. You have a category of vehicles that all promise lower fuel costs, reduced maintenance, impressive performance off the line, and a cleaner conscience. On paper, every serious contender in the electric SUV space looks like a rational upgrade over gasoline. And these 3 vehicles in particular, the ones this video covers, represent 3 genuinely different philosophies about what an electric vehicle is supposed to be. One of them built its entire reputation on software, seamless integration, and an ecosystem that rewards loyalty. Another engineered its vehicle around the kind of battery science that its competitors are still trying to catch up with. And the third positioned itself as the practical, mature alternative, the responsible choice for people who want the benefits of electrification without committing to anything experimental. The trap is that all 3 of those narratives are partially true and partially dangerous. Because the moment you start evaluating an EV through the lens of its best-case scenario, you stop asking the question that actually protects your money. What happens when this vehicle performs at its worst, and can I live with that version of it? Every vehicle on this list has a version of itself that is genuinely impressive. Every vehicle on this list also has a version that is quietly exhausting. The difference between those 2 versions is not a manufacturing defect. It is a lifestyle mismatch. And lifestyle mismatches do not show up in spec sheets. Imagine driving a vehicle that knows where the nearest fast charger is before you even think to ask. A vehicle whose software updates overnight, so the car you own in 12 months is meaningfully different from the car you drove off the lot. A vehicle that integrates navigation, charging logistics, and energy management into a single experience so fluid that you almost stop thinking of charging as a task. It just becomes something that happens, automatically, in the background of your day. The supercharger network is real. The reliability of that network, the density of those stations in most major corridors, and the sheer ease of plugging in and walking away, that is not marketing language. That is the lived experience of the overwhelming majority of owners who use this vehicle as their primary driver in the continental United States. But here's where the narrative gets more complicated. The thing that makes this vehicle feel effortless, its deep integration with a single ecosystem, is also the thing that locks you in. When something goes wrong, and eventually something goes wrong with every vehicle, the repair process does not resemble what you are used to. Body shops that are certified to work on this platform are not universally available. Parts can take weeks. Insurance actuaries have already noticed. The average insurance premium for this vehicle is significantly higher than for comparable electric SUVs, and that gap does not shrink over time. Then there's the real-world range conversation. Because the EPA-rated figure looks impressive in a brochure and meaningfully different when you are doing 75 miles per hour on the interstate in cold weather with the heat running. Highway driving and sub-freezing temperatures can reduce the effective range by 25 to 30%, depending on conditions. That is not a flaw unique to this brand, but this brand's range figures carry an expectation premium that makes the gap feel more jarring when you encounter it. And one more thing that buyers rarely model before purchase: depreciation. This vehicle defined the EV market for years, but that market has changed. Competition has intensified, lease deals have tightened, resale values that once held remarkably well have started to behave more like the broader automotive market, which is to say, unpredictably. The vehicle being described here is the Tesla Model Y, and it remains, for the right buyer in the right context, a genuinely excellent machine. The question is whether you are that buyer. There is a vehicle that carries inside it a battery architecture that is genuinely unlike anything else in this price range. The chemistry involved has been tested in markets far more demanding than the American consumer landscape. And the data on long-term degradation, the rate at which a battery loses its original capacity over years of use, is among the best documented in the entire EV industry. For buyers who intend to keep their vehicle for 6, 8, 10 years, this is not a minor technical footnote. Battery health is the foundational variable of long-term EV economics. If your battery holds 92% of its original capacity at 100,000 miles, your total cost of ownership story looks very different from the story that begins with aggressive degradation curves. On range efficiency, on structural integration of the battery into the vehicle platform, on thermal management under fast charging cycles, this vehicle was engineered with a discipline that its price point does not fully telegraph. And the interior space, the volume available to adult passengers in both rows, outpaces vehicles in a significantly higher price bracket. But this is where the story introduces its friction. In the United States, this vehicle is navigating a market environment that is not neutral. Tariff structures, regulatory uncertainty, and political dimensions of the automotive trade landscape create a purchasing context that no amount of engineering excellence can fully insulate against. The charging infrastructure question is real. This vehicle does not have proprietary access to the kind of nationwide fast-charging network that its primary competitor built over a decade. It depends on third-party networks, whose reliability, pricing, and station density vary dramatically depending on where you live and travel. And the resale market, which is to say, the moment you decide you want to exit ownership, is genuinely difficult to predict. American consumers do not yet have years of second-hand transaction data on this platform. Dealers who might eventually help you move the car may not have established pricing confidence. The vehicle being described is the BYD Sealion 7. Its technology is not a compromise. Its market environment very much is. And for a buyer who charges primarily at home, drives predictable routes, and plans to hold the vehicle long-term, that trade-off might be entirely acceptable. For everyone else, the uncertainty carries a cost that does not appear anywhere in the sticker price. On paper, this one looks like the answer to everything. The range figure is competitive. The charging speed at its peak, on an 800-volt architecture that genuinely delivers what it advertises under the right conditions, is among the fastest in the category. The interior design is distinctive in a way that feels intentional rather than derivative. The cargo space is practical. The brand has decades of reliability data attached to it. A dealer network that spans every market in the country, and a warranty structure that actually rivals the powertrain guarantees of its competitors. For the buyer who has been burned before by the quirks of early EV ownership, by charging networks that underdelivered, by software that felt like a beta test, this vehicle presents itself as the mature, resolved version of the electric promise. And then you start to own it. The software experience is functional. It is not transformative. Over-the-air updates had improved things, but the interface lacks the fluency that the market leader has spent years perfecting. Some owners report that the infotainment system feels like it belongs in a vehicle from a previous generation of development. More significantly, the charging experience outside of ideal conditions has generated consistent owner commentary. The 800-volt architecture is real. The peak charging speed is real. But sustained fast charging at those peak speeds requires conditions, battery temperature, state of charge, ambient environment, that do not always align with road trip reality. Third-party charging networks, which this vehicle depends on outside of home charging, continue to generate reliability complaints that have not fully resolved. And depreciation. The depreciation story here carries its own complexity. Federal incentive eligibility has fluctuated based on assembly and sourcing rules that are subject to revision. And the value proposition that made this vehicle compelling at a specific price point can shift meaningfully when incentive access changes. The vehicle is the Hyundai IONIQ 5. It is not a mistake for the right buyer. The question is whether that buyer is you, and whether you have honestly evaluated the gap between its best-case performance and your actual charging reality. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Every one of these vehicles is excellent under specific conditions. Every one of these vehicles becomes a slow financial and logistical drain under different conditions. And the buyers who end up frustrated, the ones who post in forums about regretting their purchase, the ones who take a significant loss at trade-in time, are almost never victims of engineering failure. They are victims of optimizing for the wrong variable. They compared peak charging speeds without mapping where they actually charge. They calculated fuel savings without modeling their specific insurance differential. They read range figures without accounting for the highway speeds and climate conditions of their actual commute. The best electric vehicle is not the one with the highest rating on any single dimension. It is the one whose strengths align with the moments that matter most in your life, and whose weaknesses fall in the places where you will never encounter them. The real total cost of ownership comparison between these three vehicles is almost never the calculation buyers think they are doing when they are standing in a showroom. Most people subtract gas costs, add electricity costs, and conclude that they are saving money. That calculation is incomplete in ways that compound over time. Start with insurance. The Model Y carries an insurance premium that, depending on your zip code, driving history, and coverage level, can run $300 to $500 more per year than the Hyundai. Over 5 years, that is $1,500 to $2,500 that never appears in the purchase price comparison. Battery replacement risk sits differently across the three platforms. The BYD's chemistry is engineered for longevity. The Model Y has a strong degradation track record in moderate climates, but more variability in extreme cold. And the IONIQ 5 has a shorter long-term data set in American markets. Maintenance costs are genuinely lower across all three compared to gasoline vehicles, but the repair cost per incident when something does go wrong varies significantly. And the Tesla platform specifically generates the highest average repair bill among the three when body or sensor damage is involved. Two buyers can purchase the identical trim of any of these vehicles in the same month and end up with completely different 5-year financial outcomes based on where they live, how they charge, what their insurance profile looks like, and whether a depreciation shift hits their platform between purchase and sale. The math of EV ownership is personal. It is not generalizable from national averages to your specific situation. And the channels, including this one, that tell you one of these vehicles is objectively the best financial decision are abstracting away the variable that determines whether that claim applies to you at all. The charging reality of EV ownership in 2026 is not what it was 2 years ago, but it is also not yet what the industry promised it would be by now. The Model Y owner has access to a supercharger network that, despite its growth pains, remains the most reliable fast charging experience available to American drivers in terms of uptime, station density along major corridors, and consistency of the charging session itself. That advantage is real, and it is not trivial. For a driver who regularly covers long distances, the psychological cost of charging uncertainty, arriving at a station to find non-functional equipment, inconsistent speeds, or a wait, is not an abstract inconvenience. It is a drag on daily quality of life that some buyers underestimate until they are experiencing it at 10 p.m. on a highway in an unfamiliar state. The BYD Sealion 7 and the IONIQ 5 both rely on third-party networks, primarily Electrify America and various regional providers, whose reliability has improved but remains inconsistent by the metrics that matter most to regular users: uptime percentage, speed delivery under real conditions, and pricing predictability. The IONIQ 5's 800-volt architecture means that when a compatible fast charger performs as advertised, the charging session is genuinely fast. But the gap between advertised peak speed and delivered average speed across a session, accounting for the thermal management curve, the state of charge range where peak speeds are actually available, and the ambient temperature, is wider than the marketing material suggests. Home charging solves much of this for daily use. The real test is the road trip. And on road trips, the infrastructure gap between the Tesla ecosystem and everyone else has not yet closed. The buyer who genuinely belongs in a Model Y is someone whose life is already organized around digital ecosystems. Someone for whom the seamlessness of the charging experience, the over-the-air software improvements, and the navigation-integrated energy management justify a higher insurance bill and a more complex repair environment. If you live near a supercharger corridor, if you drive primarily on routes where that network provides coverage, and if you are willing to accept the depreciation variability of a platform in the middle of a competitive repositioning, the ownership experience genuinely delivers on its promise. The friction points are real, but manageable if your context matches the vehicle's strengths. The buyer who belongs in a BYD Sealion 7 is someone making a long-duration ownership bet. Someone who charges at home almost exclusively, drives primarily within a known radius, and is making a 10-year calculation rather than a 3-year one. The battery science is the argument, and it is a compelling argument if you will be there to benefit from it. The resale uncertainty and the infrastructure dependency become acceptable trade-offs when you are not planning to sell the car and when your charging needs do not regularly extend beyond what home charging provides. This buyer also needs a tolerance for market perception risk, the awareness that political and trade dynamics can affect the brand's reception in ways that have nothing to do with the vehicle itself. The buyer who belongs in a Hyundai IONIQ 5 is someone who wants the efficiency and reduced operating cost of electrification with the dealer infrastructure, service network, and brand legibility of an established mainstream manufacturer. Someone who values the fast charging capability on road trips, but primarily charges at home and will not be stress testing third-party network reliability on a weekly basis. Someone who can tolerate a software experience that is competent without being exceptional. This buyer is not settling. This buyer is making a rational choice that matches their tolerance for friction, their financial profile, and their use case. And that is exactly how a smart vehicle purchase should work. The wrong EV is not the one with the worst specs. It is not the one that lost the comparison chart in a YouTube video. The wrong EV is the one that does not match how you actually live with a car. The one whose strengths appear in situations you will rarely encounter, and whose weaknesses appear in the situations that define your week. The buyers who walk away from EV ownership feeling burned are almost never people who chose a bad vehicle. They are people who chose a vehicle that was right for someone else's life. The question this video cannot answer for you, and the question that no comparison chart, no spec sheet, and no review can answer, is whether the moments where these vehicles perform best are the moments that matter most in your daily reality. That answer is yours. And if you have been watching this and something about your own charging habits, your own driving patterns, or your own expectations started to feel slightly uncomfortable, that discomfort is worth listening to.